I have been coaching missionaries for the last 7 years in their partner development. So I'm coming from a place of having very clear training and steps and very clear ways of coaching people to do that. We can't do that in 15 minutes. That's like months that we work together and we fund their mission, right? So what I'm hoping that we're going to accomplish in our 15 minutes, and we have 15 minutes of Q&A, so we can also talk about how we use that. But the 15-minute talk time, I'm going to share some really basic biblical principles that guide everything that I teach. And I'm going to share a couple of barriers that people encounter that are very common and that need to be addressed if you're going to do this successfully. And then I'm going to talk just a little bit about what two-way partnership means. So at the end of that, if you're really looking for I need steps, what are your 6 steps that you do, to get out there and do it? I'm more than happy to move. We have this room next door, and after we finish the 15 minutes talk, the 15 minutes Q&A, we can move to the next room, and I can give you the quick rundown, and if it's stuff you're really interested in and you want to know more about, I'd be more than happy to get your contact information and send you some materials that will help you with that, okay? So that's the best way I know how to use this kind of space. It's a little bit tricky, but hopefully that will be helpful. In that 15-minute Q&A time, if we feel like you guys don't really have questions, but you're really interested in knowing what those 6 steps are, we could always use that time to just run through those as well. So for those of you who just came in, I was just explaining the format. Most of the people who were in the room were interested in raising personal support or learning how to raise support for a ministry they want to fund in their church. So I think this is very applicable to that, but I'm not going to be doing the step-by-step. I have 15 minutes. So you'll be hearing a lot more about principles and ways that we can look at this. And it's 1:29, so you have 1 minute if you need to get a drink of water or a sweater because it's cold in here.
Or for a coat.
Yes. Just stand here, smiling, waiting to see if anybody comes in at the last minute. All right, I'm just going to start by praying, and then it's 1:30, so we can get started. Lord, thank you so much for the way that you guide us in mission and the way you send us out, the way that you encourage us to obey your word and to go to all the corners of the earth, including our backyard, and minister to your people with the gospel of Christ. We know, Lord, that it is impossible to do this job on our own, and that you have not asked that of us, and that we desperately need your guidance and wisdom as we seek out partnerships that will sustain the ministry call that you've given us in our lives. So I pray that this time would be very useful and meaningful for every single person in this room, that you would guide me by your Holy Spirit, that I would be able to speak the truth of your word and to be able to encourage and uplift those here, and that there would be some true practical application from these principles that we share today. And we ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. So by way of introduction, my name is Sarah Kwolek. My name tag will probably turn 25 times during this thing if I notice it, but it's Sarah Kwolek. I live in Ambridge, Pennsylvania, and if any of you know Trinity School for Ministry, that's in Ambridge, Pennsylvania. Hey, Frank. And I lived there because I went to Trinity way back in 1998 with Frank, and I married a guy from Ambridge. And if you know anything about Western Pennsylvania, you'll know that when you marry someone from Ambridge, you don't really leave. So that whole thing about God calling me to Africa, here I am in Ambridge. But what the Lord did was he took my life and sort of turned it upside down and showed me that the gifts he had given me were not just for one small town in Africa, but in fact he really wanted me to be able to bless and encourage people that were serving all around the world. So I ended up, after many years of kind of trying to figure out what that whole missions degree from Trinity was going to do for me, I ended up working for Global Teams for 7 years, and my primary job with them when I began was coaching and training missionaries in their partner development. I had been doing nonprofit fundraising for about 10 years prior to that, and I had become very disenchanted with the way that secular nonprofits think about fundraising. And I wanted to see how I could marry some of the principles I learned with biblical truth. And that's how I ended up coming to work for Global Teams. Since then, at the end of last year, I left Global Teams and joined the Anglican Diocese of Pittsburgh, where I serve as the Director of Stewardship and Partnership. So I'm once again kind of reconfiguring some of these things the Lord has been teaching me over the years to apply both to individual church planters and also to churches. And it's been an interesting ride so far. We'll see how it goes as I continue. So, with that in mind, the title of this is Funding Your Mission, Partnership in the Gospel. If this isn't where you're meant to be, it's fine if you need to get up and find your right place. I said in the beginning that we are going to be talking about principles. We are not going to be talking about practical steps. We have 15 minutes. If you would like more practical steps, I will be more than happy to meet you in the next room after we're done here, and you can get some of those from me. When we talk about partner development, there's this, oftentimes people say to me, oh, you're just saying that like the nice Christian way to say fundraising. And what I tell people is that could be true, depending on your mindset. But what I want people to do is to adopt the mindset that if we really want to fund our mission, we have to look at the whole relationship. We have to be committed to partnership the same way that Paul was committed to partnership, or we will not sustain the ministry God has given us. So for us to understand what that looks like and what that means, we have to start at the beginning with Scripture. I typically, when I teach this material to missionaries that are training, getting ready to go out, I like to start with an inductive study of Philippians. If you're familiar with inductive studies or manuscript studies, it gives people a way to just look into the Word and really start to understand in a deep heart level what it's saying for their life and what the Lord is trying to speak to them. And as I've done this year after year, what I've discovered is that it's very easy to find 4 kinds of partnership in Philippians. So there's partnership in the gospel in chapter 1. There's partnership in the Spirit in chapter 2. There's partnership in suffering in chapter 3. And there's partnership in giving and receiving in chapter 4. In our short time together today, I can't walk you through all of those passages, but I want to encourage you when you leave here to make it a priority to do that study yourself. And it's super awesome if you do it as a manuscript study. If you've never done that before, it's a really great practice. And if you just look up manuscript study of Philippians online, it will take you to an easy link with a manuscript. You can print it off. It gives you instructions for how to do it. It's great. When we think about partnership, the word that's used in Philippians, and I am not a Bible scholar, but I've been taught a lot of good things over the years. One of the things I've been taught is that this word for partnership that is used in Philippians is koinonia. And my good bishop recently was sharing with me about what that looks like. And he said, think of that koinonia, that kind of partnership or sharing, as similar to what you see in a law firm. In a law firm, the partners share by investing in the firm, whatever their part of the investment is. They share the risk. And they do this so that they have the hope and the understanding that they're going to work together and share the benefits, right? In partnership, it works the same way. We want to share the risk. We want to invest together to share the risk in the hopes that we also share the benefits at the end of the day. So partnership and mission, if we apply that, looks this very way, that we together put our resources, all that we have, into this bucket together. So maybe as the missionary, your part of that is going. And maybe as the person back home, their part of that is helping you learn a new skill that you need for the field. Or it might be being on your intercessory team. Or it might be that they are funding you, right? These are key ways that people partner with us. But they're putting all that into your bucket. And then that bucket goes and does this ministry. And the hope is that all the people who put all those things into that bucket get to benefit at the end from what God does through the ministry. If you look at these different kinds of partnership, partnership in the gospel, partnership in the spirit, partnership in suffering, partnership in giving and receiving, it should, by the very nature of what it is, it should lead you to believe that partnership is a lot more than just money. That we have to have this holistic approach, and we have to understand that it's a bigger relationship than that, so that we can pursue it with our whole hearts, and we can do a really good job with the people who God gives us in partnership. We're going to come back to partnership in a couple of minutes. I want to talk now about what keeps us from being able to pursue partnership. So we can read those scriptures and we can say, you know what, I absolutely need to be in partnership with other people. I get it. He's spoken to me through his word. I know I need to be in partnership with other people. And we feel really energized and ready to go and do it. And then it's just like we stop dead in our tracks and we say, oh my gosh, I can't do this. And for so many people that I've coached over the years, when they get to that point, they can't even identify what's going on inside them. They're just like stuck. They feel so stuck and they feel like I can never do this. I don't know how to ask, or I don't want to ask. I don't know why. I hate this so much. It's just not working. You know what? Forget it. I'm not even going on the field. I can't even tell you how many people started the process with me having already abandoned their hopes and dreams of the field years ago because they couldn't get through the partner development part. And they had finally come back. The Lord had said, you have to do this. And they were ready, but they were just like, I don't know why I'm so stuck about this. So I've started working with people over the years, and I want to encourage you with another resource. One of the first things I have them read is a lecture by Henry Nouwen. I think there's one copy of this in the bookstore right now, but you can get it on Amazon. It's in a booklet form. It's called The Spirituality of Fundraising.
Excuse me, say that again.
The Spirituality of Fundraising. Really, if you came away with nothing else from this talk, a manuscript study of Philippians and reading through the Spirituality of Fundraising like every few weeks while you're doing this could probably get you through the process reasonably well.
Could you say the author was? I'm sorry.
Henry Nouwen. Nouwen. So what he does in that lecture, well, there's a lot of things in it, but the part that we're going to focus on today is that he identifies that we have a heart issue. And that heart issue is often related to where we find our security. So he does this thing, he says, I'm going to play a little game with you, and then he asks this series of questions. And the questions are all related to how you think about money. How did your family talk about money? How do you think about money? How do you handle your money? How do you feel guilty in certain ways about money? All the things that are wrapped up in money. Because money is a really taboo subject. And most of us have grown up in environments where we don't talk very much about money. And maybe we don't even know how to answer some of these questions because, well, we just never really thought about them before. But in fact, in order to get past this huge barrier of feeling confident that it's God's and we're committed to Him and not to the actual dollar, to get past that barrier, we have to look at those questions. We have to answer them honestly. We have to talk to other people about them, which is often very uncomfortable. But it puts us then in a position of spiritual health. Because if we can face some of those things that maybe are not so healthy about how we think about money or how we think about other people's money, then we get to a place where we actually are empowered to talk to people really honestly about what we have and about what they have. I've found in my own life that my family had really weird ideas about money, and I had no idea. I thought it was like, oh, we were kind of normal. This is just how people thought about money. But when I started asking these questions, I was like, oh, wow, I have some real hang-ups about money. And a lot of my hang-ups had to do with feeling like I didn't have anything. I had grown up in a family where I had been told all the time that we were poor. We were told we were poor, but we always had every single thing we needed. There was nothing I lacked for as a child. I had a roof over my head. In fact, sometimes we had really fancy roofs over our heads. I had, transportation to get wherever I needed with no problem. I had clothes to wear, oftentimes nice clothing. It might have been hand-me-downs, but it was nice hand-me-downs. We had a great, beautiful spread of food on our table every night. I didn't have any real insecurities that were around money, and yet I grew up feeling poor. It wasn't until I moved to Kenya in college and lived in the middle of this rainforest and was serving these kids that had literally nothing in this like mud and thatch preschool classroom, that it dawned on me one day, you might not be that poor. I mean, really, it took that kind of in-your-face picture. So when we get to the place where we can address those fears, where we address the issues we have, the funny ideas and concepts we've grown up with, and we pass that barrier, we can then be in a position to talk to people very openly about their own stuff and what they have and what they can offer us. There are some other barriers, and I think they're also important, probably not quite as paramount as that one. One of them in particular has to do with our own experiences of being asked or being invited into partnership by others. Many of us might be able to point to a time where somebody essentially tried to manipulate us into giving to their ministry or their mission, or maybe we felt like coerced and we were going to, we felt very guilty if we didn't do what they were asking us to do. So when you've had experiences like that, it's easy to sort of transfer that onto your own experience and say, wow, that was really bad, and I don't want to be that person, so I just won't do it. Yeah. I mean, maybe you don't feel that way, but I've run into that over and over again. And we have to get to a place where we look at those situations, and instead of just saying that was bad and I don't want that, we look at it and we say, okay, so what was bad about that? What did I not like about how that went? And when I'm doing this in the future, how is that going to look different? And how did God teach me through that experience so that I can do it the way He requires me to do it over here? The last barrier that I'm going to talk about today, and this is one that I encountered with almost every single person that I coached, was this tremendous guilt that they felt about asking, and this belief that most of them had inside that you're not supposed to ask for money. That somewhere in the Bible it says, don't ask for money. And they would always say, I mean, George Mueller never asked for money. I'd say, well, have you read very much about George Mueller? I mean, you're right. I don't think he was asking, like, please give me $100 so that I can do this ministry. But everything I've read about George Mueller tells me that he was out there telling people all the time about what God had told him to do. He never hesitated to share the needs that were before him that he wanted to address. And he may not have said, this is the amount of money I needed, but the people who heard him talk would not have had any question that there was a way that they could be in partnership with him. So whether you want to ask directly for money or whether you just want to share what you're doing with everybody in the world and do it in such a way that people at least can know that there's a need attached to it, it doesn't matter to me. That's totally between you and the Lord. And whatever you and the Lord decide is probably going to be just fine, right? Because it's the Lord deciding with you. But to say that it's in the Bible that you can't ask for money, I think would be blasphemous. I haven't been able to find that directive scripture. If somebody out there has it, feel free to share it with me after, maybe not right now. So if we can get past the barriers and we can trust that we understand that partnership is this holistic picture that we see in Philippians, then we get to a place where we want to understand, what does that actually look like practically? What would partnership be? And this is yet another thing. This sort of actually crosses between the barrier and the principles, because so many people look at partnership and they say, oh, so I'm pretty much just going and asking people to give me money, and I should probably tell them that they could pray for me too, because that seems more like Christian. And we can giggle about that, but the reality of that is very apparent if you've had any prayer letter from anybody ever. The truth is that a two-way partnership can be very rich, but it does take more effort and it does require more time. So it's important to know when you come into it that what you're signing up for, if you say that you're committed to partner development, is not getting enough funding to get on the field. It's making a commitment to a long-term relationship with other people. If you're really introverted and you really don't love the whole communication and spending time getting to know people and really building deep relationships with more than one or two people, this is going to be hard. It really is. And you need to know that up front. For some personalities, it really is going to be hard. It's not because it's hard work. It's not because we're asking you to do complex things that are really challenging and difficult and nobody knows how to do them. It's because it takes more effort with your personality. That said, the two-way partnership can offer all kinds of things. We have things to offer. It's not just that we offer going to the field when they can't. That is something we can offer. But we offer real prayer relationships. We can pray every single day. And the best partner builders that I know are very committed to daily prayer for their partners. They have a cycle that they run through. They pray each day for a period of time. They don't do it every single day for every partner. I'm saying they've got some kind of a method where they're praying for partners every day, a couple of partners a day, and they're listening to the Lord on their partner's behalf. And if the Lord speaks to them, which he sometimes does, then they send a little text or an email or whatever to that partner and they say, hey, I was praying for you, and this is what the Lord said, I think, and I just want to throw that out there and encourage you today. That's a huge gift to people. I mean, think about how much we would like that in our life. We want people to be praying for us and telling us what they're hearing from the Lord. So the other piece of that is that we can offer transparency, real life. What does a sincere relationship with people look like? It looks like somebody who tells you the truth, who is honest about the experiences that they're having, and who wants to share with you, not just in the fruit. The fruit's great, and we love it when God produces fruit, but who also comes along and wants to share in all the challenges that you had to walk through to get to the fruit. We also have relationships. So again, for some of us, relationships are harder. But relationships can look a lot of different ways. And we're not friend raising. Not everybody that's your partner will be your friend. Some of them will be. But you can have relationship with all of the people at different levels. And the Lord will help guide you and show you what that level is going to be. I want y'all to know, by the way, I'm over my time. But we'll get to the Q&A in just a sec. When we offer all those things, we also have the privilege of asking people to come alongside us in partnership. And the very first and most important priority of partnership is always going to be intercession. If you are preparing to go on the field, if you're preparing a ministry that you want to support in your church, and you have not put together a team of intercessors, you have already done yourself a huge disservice. Because God wants to bless you with the people who pray for you.
Yeah.
And you cannot do it successfully if you have not made that commitment first. I will tell you right now, personal anecdote, I am not serving on the field. I'm serving in a diocese in the U.S., and my life, for all intents and purposes, isn't all that challenging. But I have a team of intercessors that I've had since my seminary days, and it's changed, as people have come and gone or whatever. And I don't keep up with them all the time in a group, but I do keep up very regularly with all of those people individually on some sort of basis, and they always are praying for me. I've seen several of them here at New Wineskins, and every single one of them that I've seen here has pulled me aside to tell me something that the Lord was speaking to them about my family in the last month. If you think I haven't been completely ecstatic about those meetings, you would be wrong. It's a great blessing, and you need that in your life and your ministry. You need relationship from your partners. You need them to have the interest in what you're doing, to care enough to ask you questions, to be committed to you for the long haul, to want to walk that long road with you, to hear your stories, to respond to you, and to have that back and forth rapport, whether you're seeing them face to face or whether it's through an email or whatever your communication is with them. And finally, you need their resources. Partnership is about resources. It's all these other things, but it's certainly about resources too. And those resources are not limited to funds. Your partners can be instrumental in helping you build systems and structures for your ministry. You can find people who have skills that you will never have, but that you desperately find you need on the field. And those partners can come along when they know that need and say, hey, I'm really good at that. I can't serve out there, but I can show you how to do this. Or I can't serve out there, but I can provide the equipment. Or I can't serve out there, but I could come visit you and do a training, So there's lots of ways that they can resource you. That is the big picture of partnership. I would be more than happy, as I said, to do like the nuts and bolts. Here are the steps that we take in, I do a 6-week training typically with missionaries. We start with these principles and then we go from there through lots of practical steps. So if you want to hear more about that, you can meet me afterwards. But now we're going to stop and ask questions and give answers. Yes?
How important is it, do you think, to have a missionary society behind the missionary? I'm asking who supports missionaries. And 2, to have churches in general behind the missionary for financial support.
So I would say that in terms of the sending agency question, how important is it to have a sending agency? There's certainly plenty of schools of thought about this. I personally, Sarah Qualick, I think it's vitally important to have a sending body. That can look different than a sending agency, although sending agencies tend to be specially equipped to manage a lot of the things that you're going to need help with on the field, whether that's financial, partner care, strategic planning, oversight, kind of manager oversight, accountability. All those pieces are really critical when you're on the field. And if you're out there and you don't have an organization behind you who can ask you those questions or provide those resources, it's going to be very lonely and hard, a much harder uphill battle to do the work you're called to do. I have seen people go out on their own successfully, but usually they're married to somebody that lives in that country. And they just have it's a different kind of a ministry altogether. They've joined a family. And so I'm sure that there's plenty of anecdotal stories that can tell you can do it either way. I think having sending agency is a wonderful gift to a missionary. It comes, I'm sure Frank would agree, it comes with all kinds of problems. There's no perfect sending agency, and every sending agency has its quirks and funny things. But I think overall, the value you get from it far outweighs the challenges. The question about churches, you asked, how important is it to have churches as part of your funding and your sending base? I'll say that working for global teams, I learned a lot about church partnership. And one of the things I saw was that our field partners that went out with a strong sending church were by far the most successful on the field. They had so much support from those churches, and I'm not really talking about financial support, although they did have some. Every one of them had some, but in some cases it was $200 a year. And in other cases, it was $2,000 a month. But it wasn't that. That wasn't the part that was so critical. It was having that body support them, having that body behind them. They send teams of people over to work with them or just to do a missionary care visit. We had a field partner in Asia who is in a security risk kind of country. It's difficult for them already, and the wife was diagnosed with cancer. And her treatment was especially challenging for her. She went through a lot. And it was the most incredible thing. Their sending church has sent people to see her every few months to check in, just to spend time and pray with them. No other agenda. If you think about just something like that, in the catastrophic things, what a gift it is. But then in the mundane, everyday kind of things, they have a son that's back here in the U.S., and that sending church sends him care packages, once a month at college. And it's something that they would love to be able to do for him, but they can't really, far away. So it's a wonderful gift. The funding side of it, I will say this. I also think it's equally important that you don't just have one church that's funding you. You really need diversity in your partnerships. And if you're going to stay on the field long term, you need people at every level of giving. If you're really dependent on one or two churches that are giving you the vast majority of your monthly income, when one pulls out, I can tell you that you will be off the field. It will be very, very hard for you to do your partner development from the field. You'll have to come home and find new partnerships. And that can be super disruptive to the work that you're called to do. And it can be very disheartening. So it's great right from the beginning to have a great diversity of who's involved. And you may have one primary sending church that really kind of owns that relationship and puts all of their energy into loving and supporting and relating to you. But you could have many churches who have a secondary kind of relationship.
Yeah.
Other questions? I think you had a question.
You kind of answered my question.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I would love to have a question based on what you've just finished saying.
Yeah?
Now, for instance, I'm from Nigeria.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the church in Nigeria is very much concerned about denomination.
Uh-huh.
Now, it will be difficult for you to see a church of another denomination that will have interest in what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and if you're going to build your mission partners in terms of support within your church,
Mm-hmm.
in most cases, there will be a time lag for that support program.
Mm-hmm.
So you start a work, and this church is helping you.
Mm-hmm.
The church outside your denomination is not interested, and maybe after 2-3 years, the one supporting you is no longer ready to continue.
Yep.
You see, all your mission or all your program will have to stop.
Right.
So what do you do in that kind of a situation?
So this is why I'm saying up front it's great to have more people involved so that when one person stops, it doesn't disrupt everything. But if you are in a situation where you have one primary church
Supporter, yeah.
or even individual, that's more unusual, but funding your mission, and they pull out, almost not every time, but very, very often, the person will have to stop what they're doing and they will have to go and build some partnerships. The amount of time that takes is variable depending on your circumstances and how much you have to raise, of course. But I think it's almost inevitable because when you're on the field and you're doing the work, it's so consuming. It's hard to build that level of partner outreach into it. It's one thing to maintain good partnerships once you're on the field.
Yeah.
You can have a way that you build that into your everyday life, and you should. But that's not the same as going out and having to really put feelers out everywhere, figure out who wants to have a relationship with you, build that relationship to the point that you can even talk to them about the funding that you need and get to the place where you're funded. A lot of times that's going to take too much time, and you're going to have to take time away from ministry to focus on that in a very intentional way for maybe 3 months or, depending on how much you have to raise. In some cases, people end up having to come off the field for up to a year, or in some cases, people don't go back on the field because they can't recover from that. And we hate to see that happen. I mean, that's like the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
You had a question?
Yeah, just real quickly, at the beginning you said a certain way to study Philippians.
Manuscript study or inductive study. And if you look it up online, you can find links, and it does have good instructions for it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Are there other questions? Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about finding supporters amongst non-believers?
Actually, it's a great question. Finding supporters among non-believers. One of the things that we do when I go through the training process is ask people to make a list of kind of all the people. Who are all the people in your life? And I'm always asked the question, does that really mean all the people? There's this guy that I get my dry cleaning done. He's Muslim, and I don't think I'm going to talk to him. And I tell them every time, no, all the people. If you have a relationship with your Muslim dry cleaner, he should be on your list. And I am constantly amazed at how when we have real relationships with people and we're talking to them about what we're doing, how God opens doors for non-believers to get excited about our work. It won't always happen. But I don't think we should ever hesitate, because it's who we are, it's who God made us. We do hesitate to share our faith, right? So many of us struggle with people who don't believe what we believe to tell them what we believe. That's a hard thing to do. So I don't want to in any way minimize that. But it is our call, and we are people of faith, And it is like, what's that story? If you found this amazing treatment for cancer, wouldn't you want to go out and tell everybody about it and make sure that everybody that has that cancer has it? Like, this is salvation. Why are we not out just telling everybody about the salvation we have? But this is actually often a great opportunity, because very often our mission work isn't just evangelistic, but it comes with a more holistic approach. And very often non-believers can get kind of excited that somebody is doing this kind of in a cool way. And wait, you know what? You're sharing your faith, but you want to make sure that their needs are provided for, or you want to build relationships with people, and you want to love people and have them in your home and care about them, like they might be able to get on board with that. So I think it's absolutely fine to reach out to non-believers. I think you do often have to, at least in the beginning, you often have to do that in a specific way that's maybe different than you're going to reach believers, because you may have language that wouldn't be familiar to them, and you have to make sure that you're communicating in a way that they'll be able to hear what your heart really is. You don't want to put them off by language that they're just not going to understand. And that would be true, right? I mean, if you're crossing cultures, hopefully you're already kind of aware of shaping language. We have about 30, actually we're 2 minutes over, I just looked, my stopwatch is running. If anybody has other questions, you're more than welcome to go to the room right next door, but we need to vacate this room for the next talk, unless you're staying for the next talk. And I will be over there to answer any further questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.